I'm sitting here with Deborah Goldstein, and we were just talking about, actually, we're going to share a secret with all of you. We're both introverts.
Yes.
And that was a really fascinating conversation, and we were also talking about the fact that people never really believe that when we first tell that, and what some of our coping mechanisms are
Exactly.
for doing that, and that sort of fear of walking into the cocktail party and having to walk up to someone. So how do you sort of cope with that?
I tend to not go to very many large anonymous networking events unless they're driven events, because then I'm managing the event. I much prefer having one-on-one conversations or small group dynamics.
I love that. So that brings us to Driven. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing with Driven and what your other business is too, which is equally as fascinating, and how you got there from being a successful restaurateur, because I just love your eclectic background.
Thank you. Do you want me to start from the present and work backwards?
Any
or
way
to the
you
past?
want to tell the story.
Okay, I will reverse back 25 years when I opened my restaurant. It was Goldie's by the Bridge in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and we called our food fresh market cuisine. Now, if you think about now,
Oh
what's
yeah,
hot?
that was huge. I mean, no one was doing that then.
No one was doing that then.
Wow.
And I love the restaurant business. I consider it a legalized drug because anybody can do it, but it is something that pumps through my veins to this day. However, after running the restaurant for 7 years, I realized that I have a decision to make. I can either keep this restaurant running as it was and be in love with every day and, go through the struggles, which every business has, but I would never find love in my life, because really in the restaurant business, the restaurant is your lover. And I decided at that point,
It's a tough business.
yeah, it's very hands-on
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And so I decided to give myself the opportunity to try and live a more balanced life. And I closed the restaurant, and
That had to have been scary.
it was scary, but at that moment, I knew that it wasn't sustainable. I knew that I began to feel like a slave to my business, and so much of the joy had been taken away that when you're not doing something that you love, first of all, it shows with the guests, but second of all, I was feeling it from within. I didn't feel healthy. And so, although it was scary because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up,
Right.
I knew that I could not maintain this way of life. So I closed, and I sold wine for a bit, and I consulted for restaurants for a bit, and I was working with a restaurant down in the city whose main sources of clientele were movie stars and business people. And these business people were deal makers. They were bankers and stockbrokers, and they were going out for business meals. And I realized, they were doing it terribly, because a business meal is a perfect opportunity to develop business. A business meal is a perfect opportunity for genuine network connections, and these people were blowing their opportunities. So I came up with the concept of strategic dining, and I launched a business called Goldie's Table Matters, and we go to companies and we teach people how to maximize a business meal, which involves networking, it involves business development, and it involves great listening.
Yeah, I love it. When I first heard that, I was like, what the heck is this? We all know how to dine out. I mean, I've been on business meals and dinners forever, and then until I started to read some of your tips. So can you just share a couple with us so people understand? Because then I got it. That was like my aha.
Great.
Now I know what Deborah's talking
Excellent.
about.
Well, I will tell you that somebody summed it up beautifully by calling strategic dining Peter Drucker meets Anthony Bourdain meets Miss Manners. So basically what we do from the back to the front is Miss Manners. We talk about tabletop navigation, and the key is to not think about what you're doing at the table so you can focus fully on the conversation. So a tip with that is when you are in a family style dining situation, in other words, like Thanksgiving is every day, where you've got the different dishes on the table and you're sharing, it's very important to figure out before you take a portion how many people at the table, do a little division, and take less than that portion of food, because too many times in my restaurant hat, I would see people get to the end of the table. There's person 7 and person 8 have not gotten any potatoes, and there's one little potato left on the plate. So that's pretty.
Yeah, it's that younger kid in the family syndrome. Where
Right.
if I don't take mine now, I won't get it.
Exactly, exactly. Anthony Bourdain aspect is more the environment of the restaurant. You need to be a chameleon. You need to be able to be involved in the meal and acclimate to your surroundings. So one of the things that I like to recommend, especially for women, is to have a shawl of some sort in your bag, because so often restaurants are either over air conditioned,
Right.
or in the wintertime they're drafty.
Yeah,
and
like
there's
I'm feeling the draft in this one right now.
Right, and there's nothing worse than sitting at the table with your arms crossed, because although you're cold, it makes you seem unapproachable and closed down. And body language is so important when it comes to conversation and it comes to communication. And then Peter Drucker is simply the business of doing business. It's the business of the business meal. And I could go on for days about tips for that, but my tip today would be, as you enter the restaurant, to come to the present. In other words, as I came into the restaurant today, I thought about, what do I want to discuss with Cheryl? What do I want to share with her? What points I want to make, and what I want to walk away with. Because often what I saw with these hot shop business people is there was no point to their discussion. And this is the perfect opportunity. You're across the table from somebody, and unlike a desk, a dining room table brings you closer together. It doesn't push you apart like a desk might. And yet, if you're not utilizing that time where there's no cell phone and there are very few distractions, if you don't have your own agenda in your brain, then you're wasting your time. And one of the things that I think about when I walk into a situation, when I'm becoming mindful and coming to the present, is what the other person might want to get out of the meal as well, to make sure that I am sensitive and emotionally intelligent enough to ask them questions to help them and understand what their agenda is as well.
I like that a lot, and we do that too little.
Yes, we do.
Confess.
Yes,
I
we
think
do.
That's great. So now, tell us a little bit about Driven, because I think it's so exciting what you're doing. Driven Pros.
Driven Pros, Driven Professionals. We call ourselves the source for smart living. And our mission is to support motivated professionals in living a more productive, more energized, and more engaged life. And we basically do that by providing education, workshops, programming that looks at professional development, personal development, and business development. And we have been in business now for almost 2.5 years, and we have rich programming, which has, I'm so thrilled to say, has really helped some driven professionals.
Well, I'm such a huge fan of yours, as you know. And when you walked in today, I said you're sparkling, which you always are. So you are really the living embodiment of what you're telling other people to do. And I have learned a lot from you. I love having you as a contributor to the Three Tomatoes, because I always learn something from what you're doing. But there were two things that I thought we could share that really stuck out for me. One is, I've renamed it, I call it your the did it list. We all have our to-do list, and we get to the end of the week and we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't finish this, and what did I actually accomplish this week? So share what you've been doing, because it's so smart.
Thank you. When I incorporated this business, Driven, I started to do a week in review. And what I did was I would write down my challenges and my successes of the week. And the thinking behind it was, I need to present to my board of advisors. I need to be accountable. And so I wanted to be able to look over a week, a month, a year, and see exactly what my accomplishments and successes were, as well as my challenges. But it became, for me, a confidence builder. Because as an entrepreneur, as you know, at the beginning of the week, you're stressed out, and how are you going to do all this? And it's too much, and you become overwhelmed, and you become anxious. And this has turned into a confidence builder because as hectic as the week seems, by the end of the week, it's really gratifying to be able to read that you have accomplished these things. And just recently, this has become even more important to me. We did a webinar about procrastination this past Friday.
Gosh, yes.
And I asked a question, an innocent question, about celebrating success. And whereas during the course of the webinar, as I asked these random questions, people's virtual hands, they raised their virtual hands. When I asked about if people celebrated their success, at first nobody raised their hand. And then I said, really, nobody just takes a second and says, "Atta girl?" And reluctantly, one woman raised her hand. And I realized that a huge difference between men and women is men. They do something small, they're like, yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's
and
so
we
true.
as women just don't acknowledge our successes. And that confidence is somewhere, the definition of confidence is when you know that you have the faith that you are going to do something well, and that faith, the belief that you're going to do something well, propels you and motivates you into doing it. And I realize if women aren't celebrating their successes, that's one of the reasons that our confidence level is not as firm and entrenched as men's.
That so makes sense. And then the other thing that I'm so impressed with you is how disciplined you are about taking care of you. And that's so important, and it's something that so many of us neglect as women. So whether it's because we've got businesses we're running, or families, or caring for aging parents, or whatever, we don't make the time for ourselves. And I know that you made a real effort to change that. So talk a little bit about that. I'm working on doing this, but you really are my role model.
Thank you. And we're all works in progress. At the beginning of last year, I committed to incorporating 6 specific habits/rituals into my life. And for the most part, they were personal care. I wanted to do 30 push-ups every day because I don't want to get Grammy arms like my grandmother had. I want to make sure that I drink at least 2 quarts of water each day. I want to meditate every day. I want to exercise every day. And I want to express my gratitudes every day. And I found a way to braid all of them but the exercise into the first 90 minutes of my day. And my attitude is, if I do all of these things every day, it doesn't matter if I play hooky, it doesn't matter if I don't do any business. I am doing what's good for me, because in the long run, there are some days that you're not as productive for different reasons.
Right.
But if I can get these things done, I know that I'm taking the best care of myself. And even in difficult times, I know that I'm doing everything that I can do to take good care of myself. Because it's the struggles, the times of difficulty is when we don't sleep well, we don't drink enough, we don't exercise, we eat too much, we
know we're out of balance, and we know when we're out of balance, and then we ignore it all.
Exactly. So my thinking and my actions for now a year and a couple of months has been, if I can do these 6 things, I know that no matter what else happens, I am honoring myself, and I'm doing what's best for myself.
That's awesome. I love you, Deborah.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl.
You are one of my favorite people. Thank you for being our first video interview.